So hello everyone and welcome to our next guest speaker, the lovely Rachael Leffman, homeopath, who today is going to do an amazing presentation for us on homeopathy for the empowerment of women. And obviously I love this because this is exactly what you all need. So Rachael did this presentation for us kindly on the Find Your Inner Goddess retreat this year. And it really was an eye-opener and very, very informative. So I'm going to hand straight over to the lovely Rachael.
Hello. Yes. So yeah, I'm Rachael Leffman. I've been a homeopath for 20 years this year, and for me it's really important to share this knowledge. And it's called the Homeopathy for the Empowerment of Women, because basically it empowers women and men to treat themselves in medical circumstances. And in this, at the moment, we've got such a short lower access to NHS, doctors, medicines are really expensive. So it's really important that we can help ourselves at the beginning of any ailments or infections before they get serious. And really, when you start using homeopathy, you'll see how you can avoid more serious complications. So I'm going to just share my screen, and then I will talk to you about the benefits, how homeopathy works, and some remedies. There'll be some really essential first aid remedies, as well as some particular remedies for women's ailments and women's issues. So here we go. Okay, so here we are, homeopathy for the empowerment of women. This is me on a good day. I'm a homeopath and I'm a mom, and I've got 3 children who aren't children anymore. Actually, they're 23 years old and 20-year-old twins nearly. So yeah, I've brought them up entirely through the use of homeopathy, pretty much, and yeah, we've managed to stay in good health. So why would you want to use homeopathy? Well, there's many people, famous people. I've tried to put a few more female faces on this. Actually, you can see Claudia there. We've got the Queen, who lived, as we know, to a very old and pretty well through her years. Martina Navratilova, Nadia Sawalha, Boris Becker, I don't know why I put him in there. I love playing tennis, so that's probably why. And the French football team all use homeopathy and have used homeopathy. So there are many famous, well-known celebrities, if that's where you take your guidance from. And so homeopathy is completely natural. There are no side effects. All pharmaceutical medications do have side effects. If you look at the inserts in the packaging, when we say they have no side effects, it's because homeopathic remedies are designed to work with the whole body, which means symptoms from the whole body. And so we take into account symptoms that might affect you on other levels than those that you may have decided to treat, whereas pharmaceutical medications really just target one area of the body, and so then they don't take into account other effects on the body, which is why they have a list of side effects, but side effects are the effects, basically. Homeopathy works with the body rather than against it. So when we use a homeopathic remedy, we look at the symptoms and we use them as signposts to what the body is needing, whereas what we call allopathic or normal medicine works against the body, so it blocks and tries to suppress the symptoms. So if we think of the names of remedies or pharmaceutical medications, we look at things like antihistamine, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, antidepressants. They're all trying to suppress or stop the effects that the body, the symptoms that the body is producing, rather than working with it. Homeopathy is very cheap, relatively cheap. A small kit you can buy with 42 remedies, that's the one from Ainsworth, is £52. Helios do kits with 36 remedies for around £45. I sell them at a discount from my practice because I really believe that it's just the best thing. If you can have a 36 or 42 remedy kit in your house, then you have an acute situation and you can go straight to it, rather than having to phone a homeopath, although obviously there are situations where it is best to call a homeopath. It gives you independence from doctors and the medical system, which is failing, as we know, and it's not just you that it gives independence for and that it empowers. It is your whole family, mothers, brothers, kids, and on we go, and then pass it on to your grandkids. So this is why it is a great tool for empowerment. The creator of homeopathy, or the person that first created homeopathy, was Samuel Hahnemann, and he was born in 1755. So I won't go a lot into the history of what was going on around then, but basically there's a lot of revolution going on, and through that came a lot of enlightenment. And he was a qualified doctor. He qualified as a doctor in 1791, and he practiced for 9 years as doctor, and he's a very good doctor, and he did a very generous doctor as well, would treat people for very low amounts, because he really, all he cared about was healing people who were sick. But he became really disillusioned, because at that time there was a lot of what we call heroic medicine going on, which was using very crude substances and actually toxic substances to treat illnesses. So, for example, for a lot of really venereal diseases, which are quite around quite a lot in those days, like gonorrhea and syphilis, they might use things like mercury and bloodletting to basically cleanse the system, which would put the patients more at risk than actually heal them. So he decided that he would sort of leave the medical practice, and he actually spoke 7 languages. So he focused more on studying, research, writing and translation. And as he was translating someone called Dr. William Cullen's herbal treatise on Materia Medica, he came across a description of a plant in this Materia Medica, one of the herbs that he was translating, and that led to his discovery of homeopathy, which I'll talk about in a moment. So yeah, he was talking about a plant which we know now as quinine. The Latin name for quinine is China officinalis, and quinine was being described as being very effective against malaria in Edward Cullen's book because it was bitter. Now, Hahnemann thought, well, why would it be good against malaria just because it's bitter? So he decided to take some quinine to see what happened when he took quinine. He was experimental researcher as well, and he experimented on himself. And when he took the quinine, he had the symptoms. I won't read the whole of this paragraph out, but he basically took on the symptoms of malaria. Very cold extremities, he became exhausted, languid and drowsy, palpitations and just exhaustion. Just basically just very malarial symptoms that he took on. So he became quite excited about this, because he realized that, as we knew, or Edward Cullen had stated, that quinine cured malaria, and now he knew that it could also cause malarial symptoms. So that meant that anything that could cause some symptoms in a healthy person could also be used to cure those same symptoms. So he came about with the term homeopathos from the Greek, and it means similar suffering. And from here we get our first principle. or one of our first principles of homeopathy, which is that like cures like, which many of you will probably know, homeopathos, similar suffering. So what do you think he did next? Obviously, he's a curious person and likes testing things out on himself. So he tested other substances out on himself. And he also looked, it wasn't quite so silly, he looked into studied reports of accidental poisonings. So what had happened to people when they had accidentally ingested maybe arsenic, or had too much exposure to mercury. For example, the hat makers of the day, they would use a lot of mercury. So there were lots of examples of these poisonings around, which he could study. And so then he would realize that things like mercury and arsenic could cure the symptoms that they would be causing in a healthy person. Like cures like. So just to give you an example of how these how this works, if we think about a bee sting, if you get a bee sting, so that's the toxin from the bee going into your body, and then you get a really red, swollen air patch area, and the pain is obviously burning and stinging. So, and you're hopping about probably trying to get rid of the bee. So if you look at that's what happens when you are stung by a bee. So if you look at that, then if you get any swelling, which is red and probably quite hot, could very well be for a sting. Doesn't have to be from a bee sting. It could be any sting or bite if it has these characteristics. And the person is very restless, not too thirsty, and quite often apis symptoms are better for cold applications. So if you put some ice or a cold flannel on it, then it'll be much better. But worse for heat, and worse, and we look at this quite often, certain times of the day, maybe 4 to 6 in the afternoon or evening. And if you also think about apis, you might want to think about it for a person. I gave apis recently to somebody who had post-herpetic neuralgia from shingles, and the shingles had cleared, but he's still left with this really red face with stinging pain, which kept him up all night and he couldn't sleep. And he described it. His face was quite red and swollen. His eye could hardly open because of the swelling. And there was a stinging pain that kept him up at night. And so I gave him this remedy, and it was almost miraculous. He said, that bee remedy worked. Can I have some more, please? So it doesn't just apply to bites and stings. It's anything that looks like it may have been caused by a bite or a sting, even if it wasn't. Another remedy, which is like I'd say one of the conversion remedies. So if you give this remedy to somebody, or if somebody doesn't really believe in homeopathy but sees this remedy in action, it may well convert them to homeopathy. It's belladonna. So belladonna was a plant. It's deadly nightshade, basically, and it was something that women in the 19th century used to put little drops of atropine, which is the chemical in belladonna, into their eyes, and it would make their eyes dilate, their pupils dilate, so they would look really beautiful, like beautiful women. Belladonna. And if you look at the picture of the berry on the right there, you will see that is what the pupils would look like. And belladonna is for extremely high fevers. So forget the Calpol, give belladonna. And there are a couple of other remedies, but this is one of the main ones. And this fever, this temperature, this very high temperature comes on extremely suddenly. And they're very, very hot. You can almost, when you take your hand away from the person, if you try and see if they've got a temperature, you will still feel the heat in your hand. The eyes obviously are glassy and the pupils dilated. And the possible cause for this is maybe washing the hair, but basically a chill to the head, or becoming very chilled after being very hot. So it could even be something like diving into a cool swimming pool on a very hot day. And another key symptom for belladonna are the throbbing pains. So belladonna is very good for throbbing headaches, and they can become also very good for children who maybe have a bit of sunstroke and they might almost become delirious or hallucinating. Could also be good for things like night terrors. And belladonna, children or people who need belladonna are very thirsty, and quite often they want to have lemons or lemonade. Better for lying down and worse for any touch or movement, jarring movement. And the time of day for belladonna is around 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. And so these are very simple. I've included these first 3 remedies at the very beginning of the presentation because it's really easy to see the similarity of what they cure and what they cause. So the best remedy for insomnia, or the best remedy to try when you haven't got a homeopath to hand in insomnia, is coffea. Because obviously, like cures, like if you drink 10 cups of coffee before going to bed, you won't be able to sleep. If you go to bed and you can't sleep, you might want to take the homeopathic remedy made from coffea. So coffea, the picture of coffea is that they wake from racing thoughts and activity of the mind, and they can be real ecstatic states. So they're sort of almost hyper because it's like they've drunk too much coffee. But obviously on the physical level, they will maybe have palpitations in their heart area, just like too much coffee would give you. Headaches, which can be and they can be very sensitive. It's a very nervy remedy. So anything can cause that sensitivity, noise, taste, and other stimuli. So the headache feels as if there's been a nail driven into the head. And then obviously at some point, we run out of that adrenaline, we run out of that energy, and then there can be a picture of exhaustion and chronic fatigue, but that would probably not be the point at which you'd be giving a remedy to yourself or your family. That may be something that a homeopath would be investigating. So next slide. So there are 3 remedies that are really, really clearly show how homeopathy works like cures like. And so Hahnemann was already giving all these remedies, but he found that sometimes if he diluted medicine not insufficiently, if he didn't dilute it much, he would still get those other effects that I described, because obviously all substances have effects on all areas of the body. So, as I said at the beginning with allopathic medicine, so what he found was that if he diluted the medicine a little bit, and actually he developed a system, which I'll talk about in a second, where he diluted it into minuscule amounts, which leads to people questioning how homeopathy works. But by diluting the medicine, he worked out that he could almost eradicate the side effects and limit sort of any of those ill effects that he didn't want, so that to reduce ill effects. So he found that by shaking the diluted substance, he would release the energy, as I see it, of the substance into the water, but dissipate the toxic effects. And he numbered the remedies according to the number of times they've been diluted. So I'm just going to skip through here and show you, because I'm going to explain it through this slide. So we here on the left side, we have the mother tincture, which is basically the solution of the substance. So maybe the bee sting in alcohol, or the coffee in alcohol, for example. We take 1 drop of that mother tincture and we add it to 99 drops of water. And then he would succuss or shake vigorously that vial. From there, you get 1 in 99. The word for 100 in Latin is obviously, my mind has now gone blank. A century is 100, century. So 1C, 1 in 100 is the potency of that remedy. So quite often when you go somewhere like Holland and Barrett and buy, or Helios or anywhere, to buy a homeopathic remedy, you will get either a 6C or a 30C remedy. And that's quite a low dose. And if you see here, that has been diluted 6 times in the same way. So from that 1 in 100, you then take 1 drop and add it to another 99 drops, and succuss that, shake it vigorously to release the energy, and that becomes a 2C. So then from there you continue 1 drop of the 2C into 99 drops, and you get the 3C. Keep going until you get to 6C, and then obviously the same to 30C. And then when you go and see a homeopath, or if you have a mother and baby kit, you might have 200C, and we go up to all sorts of, we actually go into the 1Ms, the 10Ms, so M being, thinking in years now, millennium, thousands potencies. So it gets extremely dilute, but I really believe that the imprint of the energy of the substance is then released into the water. And Masaru Emoto, you may have heard of, he carried out some experiments on water, which I think sort of verify that water can hold energetic patterns. And what he did, he imbued water with various emotions. He would say thank you, I love you to water, or play various musical music, beautiful classical music or heavy metal music to water. And from his experiments, when he froze that water, then we saw the crystals that came out of it. And you'll see at the top right, the crystals that come out of water that was frozen after people said I love you or played beautiful music. And then if you look at the bottom layer, you've got heavy metal music, and you've got I will kill you and you fool, and the crystals are just not quite, well, they just look awful comparatively, but it just shows that there is a pattern that can be held in the water as well. So just one further important thing to observe when you do give a homeopathic remedy. When you give a homeopathic remedy, how do you know it's working? Well, Dr. Constantine Herring came up with something called Herring's Law of Cure, and that described that remedies or cure occurs, full cure occurs from top head to toes, above to below, and from within to without. So in to out means from your inner organs to your skin. So for example, if you're giving a remedy for a headache and you suddenly get a pain in your lower limbs, say your toes or whatever, then you know things are improving. Or if you have a fever, a very hot head, and then you suddenly the hot head goes and it travels down the body and outwards. This is more important when we're treating someone on a chronic level, because we know that people are getting better and the remedy's helping and we can continue, but it can help on the acute level as well. So we like to see our symptoms. We don't want to cover our symptoms up with plasters like traditional doctors. We want to look at those symptoms and make a note of them, and then what we call repertorize them, look them up and see what they might lead us to. And one remedy but there are some remedies that are just great to have in your head. Even when you get a kit, you will get a little kit with the description of the remedies and certain illnesses that they might help with. But one remedy that we all need to know about and start to use is, of course, arnica, which I'm sure you all know about anyway. Arnica is even used by midwives in hospitals. So it's crazy that they can say that homeopathy doesn't work, and it's ridiculous when there is one remedy that they do actually all use. So arnica, as you know, is the first choice for any bruising, trauma, falls, and indeed any extreme shocks. So even a car crash. So it doesn't just have to be just a fall in the street, it can be a car crash. don't just restrict the remedies to small occurrences. So the key symptom of a person who needs arnica is that person that falls over and goes, I'm okay, I'm fine, and they're obviously not. They might have blood all over their face, or they might just look like they're not fine at all. But the reason they're saying I am fine, I'm okay, is because they don't want anyone else to come near them. They're completely traumatized. They have a fear of being touched and of anyone approaching them. Arnica is also really good after any anesthetic, and as I've said, a car crash. And people say that basically arnica can bring the soul back into the body, or bring you back into your body, ground you. And another symptom of arnica can be that the memory can be quite poor. Obviously, in shock, you don't completely remember what happens. I'm going to skip this story because it's quite long and we haven't got a huge amount of time, but basically this is a story from a doctor who's working in A&E, and for various reasons, he was also a homeopath, and for various reasons the necessary medication wasn't available, but he managed to help somebody who had had a heart attack with our simple remedy arnica, and this man actually discharged himself as a result of that. So something else that we look at, key pointers in the body, and something called clams is a mnemonic for how to remember what we need to look for in the person in order to help give us a clear and accurate prescription. And CLAM stands for concomitant, i.e. what goes with the symptom. So for example, headache with nausea. The location, where is it? Is it in one place? Is it on the right hand side or the left hand side, or does it move about? The etiology, which means the cause, what caused the injury or illness? So was it a sting, a puncture wound, a fall? That can help. Modalities are what makes it better or worse. That's really important. So someone, for example, we've talked about belladonna and apis now, and belladonna is worse for cold applications, and it's hot, red and hot and sometimes swollen, whereas apis is better for cold applications. So that would be a differentiation between those two remedies. And then sensations. Are there any particular words that can be used? Throbbing in belladonna, stinging in apis. Then you get shooting pains in hypericum, which I'll talk about in a moment, aching pains, stabbing pains. So any sensations. So we're looking for just real standout keywords that will help us to get a full prescription. Okay, so pulsatilla was my first ever remedy that I was given as a teenager when my periods had just started. And pulsatilla is the pasque windflower. It's a common childhood and teenage remedy, but it's also good for any hormonal issues, and I have given it to menopausal women too. It's a very weepy, emotional and tearful remedy. They want people to know that they're needing comforting. And if you think about the flower blowing in the wind, the symptoms are very changeable and their moods are very changeable. So everything's changeable with pulsatilla as it blows with the wind. So a child can go from being really happy one moment to really irritable the next. So that's why it's great as a teenage remedy. And in the same way, the symptoms can move about. So if you say, is it on the right or the left side? Oh, well, it moves about. That can be pulsatilla. And again, this cycle can be irregular. The menses, the periods can be very irregular, but they really want company. So that's obviously why they're weepy. They want to tell you that they're sad and they need someone to talk to. And the children are very clingy, weepy, whiny children. So the younger children. The flower grows in very dry, sandy soil. And when we look at plants, And actually any substance in homeopathy and where the remedy comes from, we take what's called sign and signature from the plants and the substances to give us a clue as to what that person that needs that remedy might be like. So the flower grows in very dry soil, and the patient who needs pulsatilla is very thirstless, so does not drink much water. They will be the child who is ill, who the mum is trying to get to drink loads of water, and they won't. They're just not bothered. They're not interested. They have very thick, bland, yellow-greenish discharges, snotty. Think about snotty, whiny children. And they're worse when they get their feet wet, especially, but any wet weather they're not into. And they're better for fresh air. So just going out into the fresh air. I mean, I had my daughter once when she was a baby, and I would just step outside the front door if she was crying, and she would stop crying. So just also, the other great thing is when you know the remedies that your family needs, you know how to remedy them, maybe without a remedy. Okay, so then we go to the opposite of Nat Muir. Opposite of pulsatilla, which is Nat Muir. This is a person who is completely closed off, does not cry in public at all. Would be, if they wanted to cry, they would go to their bedroom and cry in their bedroom. And quite often it's just, it's a very good remedy for grief, but more chronic grief, so grief after a long time. But it doesn't have to just be somebody who's died. It could be unrequited love. They're very romantic, and they often pine after that unattainable person. And they can have a lot of depression as a result of this grief or unrequited love, or it could be grief for anything, for a pet. And the patient who's suffered a long time, and they tend to build walls up around themselves. They don't want to go there. They don't want to talk about anything that might have caused them pain, or they don't even maybe even want to have another relationship again if they've been hurt in a relationship, for fear of being hurt again. So they will cry, but it will come involuntarily. So it'd be the person who maybe have hay fever with a very watery nose, or their eyes water in the wind. And then I've put here when their nose or eyes water, it's very bland. And we should compare this to another remedy, which I might talk about later for hay fever, which is Allium cepa, which has very burning discharges. And Nat Muir have a lot of headaches and a lot of migraines. It can be a good migraine remedy. And Nat Muir is made from salt, and they love salt. They crave salty foods, which in adults cannot be that strange, but in children it's quite a good indicator, because it's quite unusual for children to prefer salt to sugar. And then we come to an acute grief remedy, Ignatia, which again is a very hormonal remedy, very good remedy for women. But it's the #1 remedy for bereavement and emotional shock. So we have arnica for physical shock and trauma, although arnica can also be good for emotional if you don't have Ignatia. But Ignatia is the #1 remedy for emotional shock. And it's that shock where you have that lump in your throat and you can't swallow, which is why I've put this photograph here. The patient cannot accept what is happening, and they have this sense of disbelief, and they just can't stop sobbing. They're almost hysterical, very highly strung. So just imagine that person that just cannot stop sobbing with the grief. And Ignatia can help. I mean, obviously we understand if someone is grieving, they have to grieve, but it can just soften the blow a little bit. Just a couple of modalities there. They're better for warmth and worse for tobacco, smoke, fresh air. They just want to be at home and cry. A remedy connected to Ignatia, it has strychnine in it, and Ignatia is made from a plant with Ignatius bean. But anyway, they're both quite similar, but it's a completely different picture. Nux vomica I've put in here because it's another one a bit like belladonna, which can stop you using Calpol. Nux vomica is another of those game-changing remedies that if you give it to someone who doesn't believe in it, can really change their mind about homeopathy, because it will literally, it's our #1 remedy for hangovers in a very toxic person. Just letting my cat out. So someone who has overindulged, doesn't just have to be in alcohol, but could be coffee, any stimulants. They're very into their stimulants, and they have that heavy, fuzzy headache, hangover feeling, basically. And it can be used in a flu or anything where they feel hungover. Quite often people come to me and they describe themselves. They said, I just feel hungover with it, like I've got hangover. So I would maybe give Nux vomica, especially if they were the Nux vomica type, which is the type that will drink loads of coffee to get through the day, even if they're exhausted. They will not stop. They're tense, they're irritable, they're oversensitive and impatient, and they work hard and play hard. They're workaholics, Nux vomica. So obviously they're better for rest, warmth and hot drinks, but they very rarely would take that. And obviously think about Nux vomica, it will be worse in the morning. And we come on to another very good hormonal remedy, and this is quite a common remedy for menopausal women approaching perimenopause as well. Lachesis is for very passionate, intense people. What lachesis is made from the bushmaster snake. This slide itself may be freaking people out with the image, and if it is, then maybe you need lachesis or another snake remedy. They have an intense fear of snakes. And one thing about lachesis patients is they're very loquacious. They talk and talk and talk. They do not stop talking. So emotionally, they can be very suspicious or jealous, and they're just very intense people, but they can also be very sexual, and they can have alcoholism in the picture. It says here, obviously that's a deeper issue. But when it comes to things like hot flushes and the menopause, they can get very hot, and they really don't like to have things, tight clothing around their neck. So I've put at the bottom here collars and scarves and things. They don't like to have, because obviously think about it with it's like having a snake around your neck. But they're better when the period, better for flow, better when the period begins. And quite often the period will be dark blood, and their symptoms will be on the left side. And again, if you think about what might happen if you're bitten by a snake, they may have issues to do with the heart, especially when they're lying on the left-hand side. And then we come to Staphylococcus aureus, which is a great remedy for people who have maybe been, well, Staphylococcus aureus, the picture of Staphylococcus aureus is the picture you see on the right there. It's someone who smiles and says, oh yeah, everything's fine, and they're all sweet and happy, but underneath they're really pissed off, literally pissed off. And Staphylococcus aureus is a really great remedy for things like cystitis or UTIs. And their issues, their causation, etiology, are basically come from suppressed anger, or it could be abuse or humiliation. So it could be sexual abuse or abuse from alcoholic parents. Basically, they're sort of victims or people who stay in bad relationships. So they get very low self-esteem. It can also be caused by things like surgery and cuts, and Staphylococcus aureus is a remedy that we would quite often give post cesarean or something like that, some surgery, because there's that almost like that abuse of your body. So that's why you would need Staphylococcus aureus. And they can't have any nap in the daytime. They really can't handle it. And as I've said, it's one of the top remedies for cystitis, but that can also come off, especially the cystitis that comes on honeymoon or first intercourse. And there's a lot of trembling from anger and emotions because there's that energy bottling up inside them, but they can't express it. Another this is one of my favorite remedies to help people, mothers exhausted mothers. The remedy sepia is made from the cuttlefish, was a little bit like the octopus. If you think about an octopus or a cuttlefish with all their many arms, and they're juggling so many jobs, washing, cooking, cleaning, etc., that they're absolutely exhausted and fed up. They just really can get so depressed that they just want to run away. They just want to run away from the whole house, the kids, the husband. They've really had enough and they're exhausted. So this is just like a great remedy. I've given it to so many mums when I was younger, and primary school mums, and they can quite often have that heavy dragging feeling during menses periods, and they can get quite heavy periods, and they really just want to be alone. They don't want to see anyone or do anything, but they do actually, I haven't put it here, but they do love dancing, and they do feel so much better for exercise. So they will drag themselves out to the gym, and they will feel so much better for going dancing or going to the gym. And it's obviously anything that's come on, any ailment that has come on since they have had a child, or since menopause, or this remedy, really, that's one of the causations of this remedy. And that's very good remedy for hot sweats at menopause, and also nausea and vomiting in pregnancy, very heavy periods, and they obviously have no libido. So folliculinum, I've put it in here because it's a remedy. Obviously it's a female remedy, and it's on a physical level, it's a remedy that's never been well since the birth control pill. Can have pain at ovulation and a lot of PMS. However, it's a much deeper remedy, and I thought I had added some extra symptoms to that, but it obviously didn't save, so I'm just going to read them out to you now, because it's a very good remedy for postnatal depression. A woman who maybe feel like they're living out someone else's expectations, they may be emotionally or physically sucked dry, they may become addicted to rescuing people, they may become a doormat and become totally lost in relationships, and become full of self-denial, forget who they are, lose their individuality, their loss of sense of self. It's a really valuable remedy. There is another remedy that's very close to it, and it's the sort of remedy you probably would be prescribed by a homeopath, but I just want to give you an insight into the power of homeopathy to transform. I will just quickly run through Fuga. It's another period remedy, very heavy periods, dark with clots and sharp stitching pains. And it's just, I just wanted to put it in there. Another remedy that you could consider, and it will be in a kit if you get a kit, and the kit will have a fuller description of the remedy. And black cohosh, many of you will know, as a herbal support for the menopause. So that's another reason I wanted to put it in there. Aconite is a massive remedy, a bit like arnica, so it should be up there with arnica, and it's the first thing that you take if you sneeze and you think you might get a cold. It comes on, things come on very suddenly, and they have a great fear. It can come on from either a very cold, dry wind, or a fright or shock can be the causation of this remedy. Massive fear of death. They can get very high temperature very quickly, but usually around midnight. So think about belladonna's around 3 a.m., 3 p.m. Aconite would be about midnight. Belladonna would be less fearful and more hallucinatory with their fever. Aconite would be completely terrified and really think they're going to die. And they again want thirst for cold drinks, and they're better for fresh air, and again worse for touch. And then another key remedy which you must pack if you're going traveling, arsenicum. Take your whole kit, which I mentioned at the very beginning. If you think about the symptoms, if you're poisoned by arsenic, it is the #1 remedy for food poisoning. You will have diarrhea and vomiting. And arsenicum, people who need arsenicum quite often just obsessively worried about their health, and they're fastidious. They're always cleaning and worried about germs. They will have diarrhea quite often, and they will be quite exhausted, but their mind, they will have so much anxiety that they cannot still their minds. They want company. They have burning pains, so it can be for acid reflux. It's a very good remedy. And the patient is very chilly and better for heat, and very thirsty for sips of water, usually warm water. And they're better for warmth, lying down, and worse around midnight. Bryonia, another great first aid remedy, is our number one remedy for dry coughs. So I always think of Dryonia to help me remember this. So better for headaches and coughs, with the headaches, and also then again we get the flu picture. So for headaches, we might want to lie down in a dark room. It's not a pulsatilla. It wants to be alone. It does not want any movement, any stimulation, any light. It comes on more slowly than something like belladonna. And if you have a headache, it's better for pressing the head. If you have a cough, it's better for holding the chest, because it's so painful to cough. Worse for any slight movement. So if you hold the chest, it feels like it hurts less. And they're usually worried about work and money. And then here we've got another flu remedy, which I really wanted to include a couple of flu remedies. Aconite is the first onset of the cold. Bryonia comes on slowly. Gelsemium is the classic flu remedy. It's that exhausted state where they just can't open their eyes. Their eyes are drooping, they're exhausted, and they can quite often have a headache at the back of the head. They're sort of shaking with exhaustion. They're just so exhausted, and they will keep going to the toilet. But the gelsemium state of sort of paralysis, if you like, can also come on with stage fright, or what we call ailments from anticipation. So going on stage or having to go up and talk in public, that sort of thing. So I'm going to finish there with the homeopathy. I do also work with other things, which is where the rest of the talk might go, but I think that's quite a lot for you to be getting on with. And I'm going to stop sharing and just see if you've got any questions, or if that's enough for you, Claudia.
Oh, absolutely amazing. Because when you first presented it, obviously it was on retreat, and it's obviously I'm trying to be with a group and everything else and distraction. So it was really great to hear it again. And I've been taking notes. And actually I went and pulled out my amazing box that you
yes.
got me. This is the Helios kit that Rachel was talking about. Now this kit was my lifesaver when my 23-year-old was a baby, and I religiously use this kit. And I've been using this kit a lot recently. Actually, I got a reaction to something the other day, and straight in there. So this is an amazing kit. I don't know if Rachel still has some of these kits left to sell.
Yeah.
So maybe if you would like one of these kits, Rachel may have some of these kits. Is that correct for you?
Yeah, I do. And I actually bought bulk. So I sell them to my patients with a £10 discount on what they can buy online. So, and without the postage. And obviously they get in touch with me, and then they've got me to phone up if they need to as well. So that's good.
Okay, great. So amazing. So if people want to come and see you, they can come and see you on, and they can do it online, I presume, because it's quite easy to do online as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
And for a session, and you get a discount on this. And this is a kit, as I say, I've had for 23, or had it back in the day, and then I got another kit recently from Rachel, and I will be taking that on holiday with me. And it's really great to hear, and the fact that you're focusing on some of the acute homeopathy that people can use, and also the fact that you really sort of honed in on the things that women, mums, really need to know about. And it's just invaluable. And as Rachel said, right now You know, I was talking to my mum the other day, and she can't get an appointment for love nor money to see her doctor. And your doctor will only have 5 minutes to spend with you. They will write you a prescription, and you can go off and get your nice pills, which is all fine and dandy. But if you're looking for another way and someone who's going to give you a bit more time and work out exactly who you are in a mind, body, spirit, holistic approach, then I would definitely go and see Rachael. I refer all my clients to Rachael who are looking for an alternative for their health. So I'm absolutely, yeah, it's been amazing, Rach, and thank you so much. And yeah, so informative and so helpful. And yeah, so where can people find you? Where can people find you?
So I've got a website. It's Rachael Leffman, Rachael Leffman. Why did I call my website Rachael Leffman when it's so hard to spell? But rachaelleffman.co.uk. And I'm based in New Barnet. So if you want to come and see me, you can come and see me. But I do also do consultations both online and in central London at Nelson's Homeopathic Pharmacy in Duke Street, which is a very nice pharmacy where you can just get your remedies straight away. Yeah, so just go to my website, I think, rachaelleffman.co.uk, give me a phone call or an email and I'll get in touch.
Yeah, wonderful. And if any of you have any problems with that, then you just get in touch with me and I will pass on her details. So thank you once again, Rachael.
Okay.
Amazing presentation. Lots of love. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay.